Welcome to Windows on the World. Tonight we're going to be talking about how you are being steered. And guess what? The steering process is going to be expanded under the new government in the UK and of course around the world. You may want to look at a previous show that we did on this subject called Citizens' Assemblies, End of Choice, which is basically summing up what it all means. And it was actually Extinction Rebellion who lobbied for citizens' assemblies in the UK. Citizens' assemblies are merely a way of gaining what they call group consensus. You will see this also in all of your local town council meetings, but this is a bit bigger because it actually impacts on every part of your life. You're going to be asked, or some people are going to be chosen to take part in these citizens' assemblies, which means you are steered into the already known and intended outcome. In other words, you have one choice, no choice. So, name of this show, Citizens' Assemblies, Global Steering for All. So, did you know that all your rights of participation in your future have been taken away? So, if you want to know more about this, go to the show I mentioned, Citizens' Assemblies equals End of Choice, and shows such as The Solution, A Real Alternative, Elephant in the Room, Community Steering, that was with David Curtin, that's on the homepage at windowsontheworld.net, Know the Enemy Within, Agents of Revolution, How to Oppose LTNs and Local Councils, Empower Your Community, another one's called Archons of Community, and the Communitarian Agenda, that's another one, Your Community of Communism, and the Fourth World. Take your pick from any of them, they all lead into each other and give you the bigger picture. And that's what these shows have always been about. So, you can also go back to the beginning, big society change agents. That's where it all started, about 2012, 2013. I started writing about all this stuff, and nothing has changed in the template of steering. And that's what we're going to be telling you about tonight and going into some more detail and giving you the bigger picture. But an archive on the website of all this and how the whole system works is actually wasted on the 99%. And unfortunately, we've had to learn this over the past 5 years. And that is the 90% of those who actually use words such as awake to describe themselves. And it is a bleak type of comedy, but it is at least comedy. The 99% outside the newly so-called awakened are even more distracted. And as we know, the masses have never changed anything. So, dear listener, it's up to you. I think the idea of personal responsibility and integrity is paramount at this point in history. And with that in mind, let's look at the most cynical and obvious steering mechanism in history, apart from, of course, being marched to a pit and shot in the head. But, in effect, the result is the same. Yes, citizens' assemblies. It is your duty to expose this and also to make it so obvious to even the New Agers and common law Malcolms and the public in general that they get indignant about it. I wonder if they will. So, first of all, we're going to go to a website called gcacoalition.org. That's gcacoalition.org. There is now a coalition for global governance through citizens' assemblies. It says, we are a coalition of organisations and governments placing citizens at the heart of global governance. We are supporting the establishment of a permanent global citizens' assembly to address humanity's greatest challenges. Well, we know what they are, don't we? Yes, anthropogenic global warming, which is the entire new financial system of looting, control, and yes, let's face it, fraud. France, of course, went full on with its Citizens' Assembly climate change, as did the UK, and we have the same kind of puppetry going on as in France. France has got Macron, and now we've got Starmer. So, what does it say on this website apart from that? It says, a permanent global citizens' assembly would restore trust in global governance, provide people with routes to action on the issues that affect them, and decentralise power. What they mean, of course, is this decentralisation through localism. Now, what this actually means is that you are given something that you appear to have in the agenda to vote on, and it's usually something to do with climate change or anything that they want to bring through. So the outcome is already decided. You go there to be steered into the outcome. And what they do is they close doors on the way, they give you limited choices, and then they tell you through experts that you have to vote in a certain way, because if you don't, there's going to be a massive tragedy, as in global warming. And we've been through that in that show, Citizens' Assembly's End of Choice, with the Citizens' Assembly in Oxford. And we're going to get into that as part of this show, so don't worry, it'll all be explained. But if you do go to that article and those links, it will help you a lot. So in our recent show, and this was going back 11th of February 2020, I'm going to take you to this article, Citizens' Assembly's End of Choice. We describe how public participation in local planning has been taken away through steering the public into predetermined outcomes through facilitated consensus, in inverted commas, through Delphi technique. Delphi technique was invented by the Rand Corporation in 1953, and we've seen it in every protest group, every town hall, and every citizens' assembly. You have a facilitator, a co-facilitator. They guide you through a series of questions which are all steered to get the intended outcome. So in other words, what happens is a process of closing doors. It looks like you've been given a choice to start with, but the choice was never there in the first place. In the case of citizens' assemblies on climate change, the belief in anthropogenic global warming is a given. You cannot question that to start with. Therefore, the whole thing is a fraud and a farce. And the citizens' assemblies use Chatham House rules, which means that you can find out who was there, but not particularly what they said. The Oxford Assembly voted for retrofitting houses starting from £25,000 each. That's you. Everyone in the UK voted for this. Did you know that? No. Well, actually, you weren't told, because the people who attended that Citizens' Assembly agreed on your behalf. And that's what this is all about. 6 select committees decided on a George Soros-funded organisation to run the citizens' assemblies in the UK called Involve.org. Much more on them later. Involve were to be chosen, the chosen organisation to roll out the citizens' assemblies, which they duly did in the UK. And I've done several shows on this, and the info came in from the first Citizens' Assembly on climate change in Oxford. Now, let's remember, councils declared climate emergencies. They're using emergency law. That's the whole point of declaring a climate emergency, even though, of course, there wasn't one and there's no evidence for one. On what foundation evidence was a climate emergency declared? That's what you have to ask. OK, so why not ask the experts on the panel? The Citizens' Assemblies on climate change started with Oxford and will usher in draconian restrictions on private travel, the closing of streets to all traffic, along with retrofitting homes starting at £25,000. The expert panel consisted of lobbyists for mitigation and climate modeller Miles Allen from Oxford University, who is not an expert and was rebuked by a judge in a recent court case. That goes back to 2018. Miles Allen was basically exaggerating the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere through diagrams he showed in the court. The judge rebuked him on this and many other points. So Miles Allen is a climate modeller. He's not a climate scientist. He's not a climate expert, but he's the expert who's going to guide you into the already intended outcome, because guess what? The fingers in the pies are the ones who are directing you to go where you need to be directed to. So, some questions from the Oxford Citizens' Assembly. It said, currently, national policy does not require that new homes are built to net zero standards. Should the government introduce this standard? The government has already legislated to end the sale of all petrol and diesel cars and vans by 2040. Should the ban on new petrol and diesel vehicles be brought forward to 2030? You see, they give you the intended outcome in the form of a question and you go yes, because you can't disagree. That's how it works. 3. If you are a homeowner, would you be prepared to retrofit your home and bear the costs? The average of £25,000 per house. Yes, no, don't know. Well, you all voted for it. I know you didn't know that. I'm here to give you the bad news, but in a way, you do need to know. The public are being psychologically steered into agreeing to what they would never have dreamed of agreeing to if they had not been brainwashed by climate change mitigation lobbyists. That was the Oxford Citizens Assembly on Climate Change. There was another one in Birmingham. They went round the country. This is an international movement now. And the Starmer regime in the UK is going to be using this on lots of issues. They've just put out a white paper on it. Within the first few days of Starmer getting in, a white paper has been produced on this. We're going to get into that. So hope this is all making sense so far. And further shows on Citizens Assemblies. We have Citizens Assemblies, the corporate revolution, and UK shamed into stupidity. Now, those are very important shows. Citizens Assemblies, the corporate revolution, and UK shamed into stupidity. So please look them up and go to that article, Citizens Assemblies, End of Choice, at windowsontheworld.net. So, as we know, the livability agenda was rolled out in Oxford, and at the head of it was change agent Clyde Lokes, who actually implemented Mini Holland in Waltham Forest, which was the first of the implementations of sustainable development to get rid of cars and close roads. And then he was moved to Oxford, and they just changed the name of it, livability. That's what they do with sustainable development plans. They change the names of them. And since 2014, 2015, I've seen numerous name changes. All the same things being implemented, but under different names. The implementation of this agenda in Waltham Forest was very unpopular, and now Walthamstow Deputy Council leader Clyde Lokes, who was the front puppet for implementation of Mini Holland in Waltham Forest, was chosen to front the same agenda in Oxford under its new brand, Livability. So the council made videos on this that was where I said everyone should show their dislike by pressing the button on YouTube. What they did then was made the videos private. They then removed the videos. They do not want any public participation. And this is the whole of the devolution agenda. Your local council is going to have more and more power over your day-to-day life. So it's gone from central government to local government. But when they need to defer something away, they will go back and say it's central government. Do not be fooled. It's all devolution. Unitary councils, these councils making up these huge areas now. I was talking about it 8-9 years ago. It's way ahead. So even dumbed down mainstream publications like Spiked, for instance, could also see through the steering process of Citizens Assemblies. Now, this article is linked to that Citizens Assemblies End of Choice. So do take a look at that. It says in this article, there's nothing democratic about this climate assembly. This is a cynical attempt to lend a democratic gloss to eco-austerity. Watching the proceedings of the first assembly, it became clear very quickly that the process is rigged in favour of the environmentalist agenda. Expert after expert, each echoing the same message, made his or her presentation to the assembly. This was followed by a rapid question and answer session in which the assembled were told what's what by said experts. It didn't look much like a democratic debate. It looked like instruction. Well, actually, Spiked, it's worse than that. They are merely driving you into the intended outcome. Anyone who opposes it is marginalised, ridiculed, or worse. And that is when the so-called dragons come in. They're there to shut you down. All the protest groups, such as Extinction Rebellion from Occupy onwards, used this Soros-backed technique. Yes, George Soros-backed Involve, which is the organisation that rolled this out. As this show goes on, you're going to learn more and more about this. However, this article carries on. It says, these shortcomings should not be a surprise, however, given the Climate Assembly's origins. Initially advocated by Extinction Rebellion, the Climate Assembly was eventually set up last year by 6 House of Commons select committees in partnership with several third sector organisations. Remember that? Third sector organisations and NGOs and charities enforce this stuff through a spider's web of subversion. And I'm not underestimating what they're doing, and I'm not being sort of radical in what I'm saying. I'm being quite conservative. It carries on. None of these organisations has a democratic mandate, but they do all have a commitment to promoting the green agenda, which is much worse than a green agenda. This is a globalist agenda of control on every aspect of your life. Do you want it? No. So, when you find out how and what to do about this, you can take back power locally. And we've been saying that for a long time. Next, the propaganda piece in The Guardian. It's written by a change agent from Involve, who, of course, were selected by 6 parliamentary committees to be the Soros-backed organisation to steer the public into climate policy on the back of climate lies. So that's how the Oxford Citizens Assembly and you agreeing to pay £25,000 to retrofit your house came from. It came from this organisation, which is a George Soros-backed Open Society Foundation organisation called involve.org. Look it up, read it and weep. So it says in this article from the Guardian written by a change agent from Involve and another organisation, which we'll get into. It says, today, alongside lead partners Demos, we've published our Citizens' White Paper. Now, this article that I'm going to be talking about is going to come up next. I'm going to go into this first because I think it's actually more important. So let's just take you in to what the government are actually saying on their Citizens' Assemblies White Paper. It's the Citizens' White Paper. So let's just get to that first. Sorry, I've got so much information here, but I'm trying to lay it out in an order that makes complete sense, and hopefully this will. Today, alongside lead partners Demos, we've published our Citizens' White Paper, recommending that the new government embark on an era of public participation in policymaking to deliver on the Prime Minister's promise last week to restore trust in politics. Labour have only been in, a week, 10 days, and they've got a Citizens' White Paper that they've produced with Demos. Demos is a steering group. It's a think tank, very Marxist orientated, and they put out a lot of stuff against people who believe in so-called conspiracy theories. They also brought out a paper in 2010 which stated the new democracy will work with a combination of government open infiltration and citizens groups taking direct action. Now that should resonate with you after what you've just heard. So this is a long-term plan of steering people into intended outcomes with no democratic input. It says, as reported in the Financial Times, The Independent and the Evening Standard today, our Citizens' White Paper outlines how trusting citizens to participate in policy making and building in structured ways to do this into the policy process would restore trust and help stem the rising tide of populism. What they mean here is the rising tide of people being able to see through this BS. This should make you very angry if you live in the UK. It made me want to overturn it. Unfortunately, there was not any support to do that. But as this continues and it gets more audacious, surely even the most dumbed down people will realise that they've been had. I do hope so. It says the paper sets out a practical, costed roadmap to, yes, change, deliverable over the next Parliament that enables citizens to participate in the important policy decisions which the new government will face. This is the Starmer regime, remember? It builds on the Demos and Involve team's comprehensive policy and practice experience and has been developed with input from ex-ministers, shadow ministers, senior civil servants, parliamentary officers, academics and experts from across the field, meaning, of course, paid lobbyists with their fat noses in the trough. The recommendations, then, in brief. Establish panels of randomly selected and demographically representative citizens to feed into each of the new government's mission boards. What this actually means is they're going to get a load of dupes in there and steer them into the intended outcome. It says embed participation across the civil service to strengthen policy making at all levels. So this is going into everything. Introduce a programme of citizens' assemblies to resolve some of the big stuck policy questions such as social care or difficult moral decisions such as assisted dying. You can bet they're going to vote in favour of that because they've been doing it all along. The Liverpool care pathway didn't go away, you know, they just renamed it. It's all called palliative care. If you go into hospital over a certain age, do not be surprised if they put do not resuscitate on your end of your bed and on your notes, and do not be surprised if you die in there unless you manage to get out. It says set standards and embed practice to ensure citizen participation is independent, and rigorous, in line with international best practice, well, we know what that is, and ensure it reinforces, wait for it, representative democracy. This is what they call chutzpah in the business, by the way. Sarah Castell, CEO of Involve and co-author of the paper, said, the new government needs to deliver policy solutions that really work for people and at the same time rebuild public trust. Getting people from all walks of life involved in decisions has a proven track record of achieving both. This report provides a roadmap for how the new government can tackle the big policy changes together. Okay, Miriam Levine, Director of Participatory Programmes at Demos and co-author of the Citizens' White Paper, highlighted the urgent need for these reforms. She says, our political system isn't equipped to deal with the challenges we face, nor the threat of populism. Are you getting fed up yet? Good. Populism, of course, means something that's popular. It means policies that people like. It means things that people are drawn to. And now, of course, it's the enemy. So, this change agent says we need a new layer of participation. What they mean is a new layer and layer and layer of basically opaque non-involvement of the public, masquerading as, of course, the new democracy. We need a new layer of participation embedded at the heart of our political system to renew our democracy. Oh, this is incredible. So the paper also reveals public enthusiasm, it says, for participation, with 63% of you expressing willingness to join the participatory policy-making exercises, notably surpassing the 52% turnout at the 2024 general election. Well, when you realise that Labour got in with, I think, less than 20% of the vote, what are they saying with these statistics? As they say, there's lies, damned lies and statistics. And this is probably the latter. The Citizens' White Paper comes as the new government has outlined intentions to strengthen participation in policy making. The Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs has detailed plans to use customer panels to hold water company bosses to account. Meanwhile, Whitehall is preparing to advise ministers, recently launching a participatory methods forum to grow the expertise and capacity of the civil service. OK. So it says the Citizens' White Paper outlines immediate steps for the government's first 100 days, short-term actions for the coming year and longer-term plans to embed participatory approaches deeply into the political system. So they call this participatory democracy. It's basically steering the gullible into where they are intended to go. That's all it is. And I would actually have a look at that Citizens' White Paper because you may get a little bit annoyed once you know what they're doing. So it says the Citizens' White Paper sets out a practical, costed roadmap to change, deliverable over the next Parliament that enables citizens to participate in the policy decisions that affect their lives. Recommendations were developed with civil servants. I think we've been through that bit before. The immediate steps are to be taken within the first 100 days. It's coming soon, folks, including setting up flagship citizens panels to feed into each of the government's new mission boards, helping to refine priorities and working through difficult trade-offs, and creating a central participation hub to provide support for policy teams across government to build participatory approaches into everyday policy making. Can you see through that word salad now? Good. Short-term actions. It says developing the levers to normalise participatory policy making and build a culture of participation across government, and announcing a programme of at least 3 national citizens' assemblies to tackle politically and publicly salient issues in the first term, establishing a new relationship between state and citizen. Longer term plans to embed new ways of working deeply in policy-making systems and Parliament, including a duty to consider participation, to hold bill teams to account for demonstrating how they have involved the public before a bill can be introduced in Parliament. Wow, this is incredible. So they're going to steer you into the intended outcome, the public, make it look as though you agreed, before the bill goes to Parliament, and then, of course, it's going to get pushed through. And you're going to be told, well, you agreed to it first before we even made the bill. Can you see what they're doing? Good. Well, that's great. I'm going to have a quick break now, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Windows on the World. And just before the break, we were talking about this new white paper. I hope you're taking this in. It's very, very simple. It's just the end of choice. And what they're going to do is they are going to have these citizens' assemblies and make it look as though you've agreed to what they're going to be bringing in through acts of parliament. So they're going to go back and say, well, the public agreed to it. This is the end of all public participation, which I think we've been warning about for about 15 years, but never mind. I still have enthusiasm for it. And do check out the archive. Check out those shows that we've mentioned. I will be doing a live stream on this, I think, because it's very important. And I just hope it gets out to the people who want to do something about it. So remember, this was all through Demos and Involve.org. Involve.org, of course, an Open Society Foundation project backed by them, and the Marxist think tank Demos, who also said the new democracy will work with a combination of open government infiltration and citizens group taking direct action. So now let's go to this article which I found in The Guardian about a week ago, and it's guardian.com, Citizens Assemblies, and it says citizens' assemblies could work wonders for Labour and Britain, but only if they're more than a talking shop. Oh, they're much more than a talking shop, as we already know. So, as we know that involve.org is a big part of this. Change agent Richard Wilson of involve.org and other organisations who's been involved with this from the start wrote this article. So this article was written by a lobbyist. But first of all, let's look at who Involve is funded by. These are the people who are going to be running the citizens' assemblies. They were the first people to run the citizens' assemblies. Well, they get money from, they got more than $500,000 from the RSPB. That's the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. They got UK Research and Innovation, gave them 216,000 quid. Genomics England, the Newborn Genome Screening Public Consensus Group, the People's Plan for Nature, Minimum Income Guarantee Experts. These are all the people who were on the panels. And then you've got the Scottish Government gave them money. London Borough of Camden gave them nearly 50 grand. Impact Investing Institute, that's nearly 40 grand. West Midlands Combined Authority, 28 grand. North Gas Networks Limited, 26 grand. Cooperations Ireland, 26 grand. Test Valley Borough Council, 25 grand. Sheffield City Council, 24 grand. That's nearly 25 grand. UK Power Networks Operations Limited. University of Exeter, 18 grand. The Democratic Society, that's ironic, isn't it? They give them 19 grand. Royal Academy of Engineering, 16.5 grand. University of Southampton, 16 grand. London Borough of Camden, 14.5 grand. That's two lots from Camden. Home Office Shared Service Centre, 14.5 grand. Queen's University Belfast, 14 grand. London Borough of Camden, more than that was. These are all about getting rid of this is car dependency, safe spaces, climate assembly, landscape review, enhancing public dialogue about inclusion in schools. This is what this money is coming into Involve for, by the way. Facilitation training. How bloody ironic, London Borough of Camden, they gave 8 grand for facilitation training to Involve with the other 30 grand they've given them. London Borough, it's 38 grand now, more than that. Deliberative support, that's what it's called, deliberative support, 7.5 grand. Tenant engagement training, and University of Liverpool Involved, University of Westminster. Democracy research collaboration toolkits. It's all this nonsense. It goes on and on for ages. So look at Camden Council. I think they were the first ones to actually declare a climate emergency, God, this is unbelievable. Can you see how all this feeds itself through these linked organisations now? It's a massive infiltration programme of public bodies just funding each other. So, basically, they got restricted grants from the Open Society Foundation. They got 275,000 from George Soros for Democracy Network Action Network Plus. The Esme Fairbairn Foundation, they're always at the root of this stuff, 110 grand. That was for local engagement on climate change. And this is all to create these citizens' assemblies through Involve, where you're meant to have a choice. So you look at who's funding it, you've not got a choice. So they've got the Gulbenkian Foundation, £100,000 for local engagement on climate change. Forum for the Future, £106,000, Just Transitions. That was 4. The Joseph Rowntree Reform Trust, £81,702, and that was for the Network for Democracy, all through involve.org, by the way. This is all for involve.org. This is where they get the money from. Royal Society of Arts gave them 45 grand for rebooting online public dialogue. The Wellcome Connecting Science for UK Citizens Jury on Genome Editing. A Citizens Jury on Genome Editing, that got 11 grand from Wellcome. Greater London Authority, 8.5 grand for Civic Data Innovation Challenge. There you go, your data mining. Barrow Cadbury Trust and John Ellerman Foundation, 5.5 grand. Upper Net Zero Thought Leadership. Upper Net Zero Thought Leadership. So here you go. This is the organisation that is saying they are for democratic participation, and look at where the money's come from and where it's going. If this doesn't get you up out of your seat, nothing will. So let's now go to another website. This Guardian propagandist, Richard Wilson, is associated with, and I think he's a leader within this organisation. It's called iswe.org. It's part of the global to local spider's web of organisations which, as we know by now, control the narrative. And it includes NGOs, government departments, charities, the usual volunteer-fronted subversives. Yes, subversive, of course, as it's all based on deception and lies. And now, who do they partner with? iswe.org. Guess who? This is the person who's telling you that citizens' assemblies are the best way of democratic inclusion. And, of course, he's got many fingers in the pie and being paid off handsomely for being a change agent. But the organisation he fronts partners with the UN, the World Health Organisation, the European Climate Foundation, the UK Government Cabinet Office, Oxford University, Joseph Rowntree Foundation, of course, Climate Emergency Collaboration Group, the Community Fund, the Local Trust, community organisers, check them out. They're everywhere. Sortition Foundation, that's another one that is part of this Citizens Assembly rollout. The Sortition Foundation, look at their website and you'll see a picture of people, a whole load of people, and there's about 100 people there, and they're all on tables of 10 with a facilitator. That's what it's all about. So Climate 2025, the Wellcome Trust, Flat Pack Democracy, take a look at that. There are a load of people who became change agents in Frome who came out of transition towns, which was a sustainable development beginning of taking hold of the local narrative on climate change and climate policy and getting the councils to have more power through involvement with transition towns. Transition towns were massive in the mini Holland thing, by the way. The leader of transition towns became the go-to person by the Guardian, the Independent and all the other usual numpty steering newspapers for this thing that was being implemented in Waltham Forest that nobody wanted, for closing all the roads off. But he said everyone wanted it, of course. And he was the one who was running the transition towns in Waltham Forest. So there you go. And of course, we can't forget the Carnegie Endowment Fund. So his organisation, this Richard Wilson, is globalist backed. And it says our political systems are destabilising societies and the planet. That's what it says on iswe.org. Our political systems are destabilising societies and the planet. So in other words, they want an end to political systems. His website states, we develop new ways for people to lead local, national and global decision making. And one of their globalist-backed interferences in democracy is actually in Armenia. It's called the Future Armenian, is a public initiative launched by Armenians and Friends of Armenia to create a common framework of understanding around the sustainable development of Armenia as a country and Armenia as a nation. He is a global leader type and helps run ISWE Foundation. That's the person we're talking about who wrote this Guardian article we're going to be getting onto. And so they're interfering in the sovereign nation of Armenia, which has been part of many other nations in the past. It's a very complicated history, Armenia. I don't want to get into it. But remember, we had the Armenian genocide. And 100,000 people recently were pushed out of Armenia. And there's a lot of globalist stuff going on there. That's why these parasites are in there too. It says, anyone can engage by co-signing the list of 15 goals below, as well as participate in upcoming conventions, forums and discussions of the future Armenian and becoming part of planning our next steps collectively. So what this is the Agenda 21 taking over of all land, all countries by corporations, favoured corporations and NGOs. It's dead simple, nothing to it. So it says the Convention of the Future Armenian took place on March the 10th to the 12th, 2023. So it was based, guess what on? The Convention of the Future Armenian is based on the internationally recognised and widely used Citizens' Assembly model of participatory democracy. 200 participants were selected from a pool of pre-registered citizens by a transparent lottery, drawing with a representative sampling method to ensure the representation in the convention of gender, age and educational groups in society, as well as the participants' countries and places of residence. According to change agent for Global Consensus, Richard Wilson, who's also part of Involve.org, of course, the Soros-funded UK charity which leads the Citizens' Assemblies on climate change, Wilson is also embedded in the Good Help project to help people make the right decisions. You know the right decisions are the ones that were the intended outcome. So it says, we want to bring together a community of people who are committed to a good help agenda. People with first-hand experience of good or bad help, all this inverted in commas, by the way, as well as practitioners, researchers, policymakers, service providers and others who want to inspire and be inspired. They're insipid rather than inspired, these people. I hope you do realise that. You will if you've met them. It says we hope that together we can develop our, wait for it, collective understanding of, inverted commas, good help, what it looks like, how it can be nurtured and spread across our mainstream public services and social programmes. This is a den of vipers. It says if you're interested in helping to build this community, please get in touch. And you can find more information at nesta.org.uk Project Good Help. Now, all of these, as we can now see, are interlinked. I've been talking about this for so many years. I often get fed up of talking about it, but it's so important and it's so obvious and it's so simple that once you get it, once you see it, you will never unsee it. You will see how it works, and then you will know how to take it apart by going in locally and becoming local councillors, actually taking back from these people. It can be done. This has to happen globally. It has to happen globally, and you have to be involved. Otherwise, it's game over, because this is now in Act 3 and pretty well advanced. There's always a way around everything, of course, and those of us with a little bit of grey matter still going round in our heads will always be able to get round what is going on, which is very encouraging. So yes, it says here, Albert Bandura published his seminal paper, Self-Efficacy, towards a unifying theory of behavioural change. The central hypothesis that in order to pursue any goal we must have some confidence that we can achieve that goal is widely accepted. This is this white paper and how it ties into all these change agent organisations. Now the thing about this is, they give you these stupid examples and it all sounds very nice on the surface, but what they don't tell you is you've got no choice. They're just using psychological subversion to push you into the intended outcome. It says his theory gave birth to a major field of research on the role of self-efficacy. So what they do is they put you at the centre of it as though you're making the decision when the decision's been made for you. It's quite simple, nothing to it. He says, or what we refer to as confidence to act in areas as wide-ranging as parenting and substance abuse. Bandura's theory remains a fundamental principle of social psychology. And we explore programmes that have put these principles into practice. So what you're dealing with is a load of mind-controlled, psychological steering numpties with no souls, no brain, but very audacious and well paid. And that's what you're up against. Let's now get to an article that goes into this change agent who we're talking about. And he's just one of them, by the way. I mean, once you see one, you'll see all the connections. Go on LinkedIn. That's where they all actually network, on LinkedIn. It says they also partner with Flat Pack Democracy, another front-led, it's basically sustainable development front clones. And it was in Frome, who came out of local network steering group Transition Towns. They were the first to capture local consensus, or try to. It's now, of course, far advanced and also a major growth industry, as was, of course, predicted when climate change became the chosen driver after the Rio conference in '92. So there's another thing called Flat Pack Democracy, and this came out of Transition Towns. All of this just came up with one internet search, with one Guardian article. I knew most of the stuff that was behind it already, of course. But there's more and more of these organisations all the time. And where are they getting the money from? Well, the point is that sustainable development is a business. This is their business model. This is how they're making money. It's a gravy train for parasites, for taking the world's resources. And there's loads and loads of greedy, thick, idiotic people who they're training daily to enforce it on you. So it says this thing, Flat Pack Democracy in Frome, is by this person, 57-year-old Peter McFadden, who has lived in Frome for nearly 30 years and has spent much of his adult life working for disability charities as well as founding an eco-friendly local undertakers. So he's a do-gooder of the highest order. A graduate of the Southwest hippie counterculture. Now, this is interesting because a lot of these ones who were in this New Age and hippie thing and New Age travellers, loads of them are now change agents because they all got on board with sustainable development. And I've encountered tons of these for the last 15 years. These stupid, middle-class, spaced-out numpties who spent their lives taking drugs 20 years ago, who are now brain dead, are enforcing this stuff. Oh, he brims with can-do enthusiasm. Can you imagine how irritating this arsehole is? He was one of the people who co-founded it at the tail end of 2010, having been repulsed by what he had seen of the existing town council. Well, it's even more repulsive now, isn't it? His main source of irritation was the extent to which the party politicians running it seemed walled in behind bureaucracy and protocol. Now, this is actually the beginning. So he was basically an agent of the big society because it says in 2010. So he was empowered through the big society, through Cameron's big society. And when he approached the town's ruling Liberal Democrats on behalf of Frome's branch of the Transition Towns movement, which seeks to respond to climate change on the local level, he said, I went to them and said, what's your green policy? And they said, the park. I said, climate change, peak oil. What about all these things that actually matter? They said, no, sorry, it's the park. Well, they had brains, didn't they, in those days? So basically, these are the sort of idiots you're up against. So Starmer should announce an independent and permanent citizens' assembly that everyone in the UK could be selected for and everyone in the country could participate in. This is what this article in The Guardian is saying by this change agent who is connected to all of the above and, of course, a lot more. He said it should have the status and powers of a royal commission, such as the ability to subpoena witnesses, take evidence under oath, request documents and do all of this on the assumption that the government of the day will implement its proposals unless ministers have a very good justification not to. Well, there's going to be no justification not to do anything under the Starmer regime. He says there should also be a system for the citizens themselves to set the agenda. There you go. Although the people who participate in citizens' assemblies often find the experience beneficial, the number of citizens who participate is low. The Global Citizens' Assembly, now being launched as a permanent body, is overcoming this by using a website that anyone can use to run their own satellite assembly. So you'll find in your local area there's more and more of these people, and there's going to be these local assemblies, and they're all going to be steered on pretty much everything. Every local issue now is going to have this process. So if you don't get involved and destroy it from the outset, then it will embed itself completely by the end of this year. The results, he says, of these are then added to a portal to influence the overall conclusions of the main assembly. So basically, there's going to be like loads and loads of these satellite assemblies that are all going to lead into the bigger assemblies. It says the government should do the same, encouraging people to run their own satellite assemblies in community groups, charities, councils, companies and faith groups. It could be an annual fixture of citizenship in schools. Then millions of people would be part of the assembly, providing a tangible mechanism for Starmer's promise on the steps of Downing Street to invite you all to join this government of service. Wow. Let's go into some detail. Citizens' assemblies are groups of people selected by lottery. Much like jury service, they are demographically representative of the place in question, and they can help build consensus around divisive issues and inform the public of policy nuances in areas where there is likely to be resistance and misinformation. Misinformation means people who actually know what's going on. Same as resistance, of course. They can also build solidarity between people, through the change agents, of course, and give citizens a stake in political change. This is particularly relevant in areas such as health and net zero, on which communities can become divided at implementation. Just look at the conversation, it says, around vaccines, for instance, or the anti-ULEZ protests. It's always back to the same thing, isn't it? It says we all, that Richard Wilson, the change agent from involved.org and all of the above, says we also know citizens' assemblies almost always make better decisions than politicians, partly because they are not seeking re-election, aren't victims of lobbying, really, and have a formal process to make sure participants understand the issue. Yes, they understand the issue they're going to be steered into, but not any of the other issues which they can't choose, which should have also been on the table. This is not the first time a Labour government has sought help from citizens' forums. You might remember the People's Panel. Well, let's go back to the big society, then that's where it all started. It says the big conversation, commissioned under the Tony Blair government, or the many citizens' juries and summits of the Gordon Brown years. Many of these were run by Deborah Mattison, Starmer's head of strategy. There you go. When Mattison was running these assemblies, I was a director of a national public participation charity called Involve. And we led a lot of this work for the government. Citizens' juries and summits were organised to discuss the tough issues of the day, such as health, climate and pensions. At each event, citizens worked incredibly hard to generate some excellent proposals, but their impact on policy was limited. We asked special advisers and ministers why this was the case. And the answer was simple. These deliberative processes didn't provide the government with a mandate to act. They had neither the profile nor the power to help politicians make potentially unpopular decisions. Wow. I've got a lot of stuff here, but I think I've been going on quite a long time. It then goes into the French Climate Assembly, initiated by Macron as a government chamber in its own right. And he famously said he would implement its recommendations sans filtre, I think, sans filtre, the assembly took place in Palais de l'Élysée in Paris with massive photos of the citizens pinned to the building. It was a huge media event and 70% of the adult population were aware of it. It proposed a radical agenda, including bringing ecocide into law and provided the mandate for policies such as limiting domestic flights and prohibiting adverts for products that emit the most greenhouse gases. Its effects were like a defibrillator, jolting the political space into life. Well, that's sick, isn't it? When you think about it, bit of black comedy there. What replaced all the phone boxes on the village greens? Defibrillators. Yes, and we know why that was. That's incredible, isn't it? Limiting domestic flights, and the public voted for it. And the outcome was, we don't want to fly anywhere. Now compare that, he says, to the UK's Climate Assembly, which took place next to the motorway in the Birmingham Park Regis Hotel in 2020. Despite having David Attenborough in attendance, Mayday, 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 climate emergency. The event was barely noticed by the general public. Well, that's the idea. It was barely noticed by the general public, but every person in the United Kingdom has agreed to retrofit their house starting at 25 grand plus all the other crap they want to sell you, the heat pumps, etc. It says, although the Assembly was commissioned by 6 select committees of the House of Commons, no cabinet members committed to listening to its recommendations, let alone acting upon them. Despite 6 weeks of citizen deliberations and outstanding work by its organisers, it has sunk from the public mind with little trace. Well, actually, no, it didn't. Because they brought in livability in Oxford on the back of the Citizens' Assembly on climate change. So that's a flat-out lie. You see how they lie? What they do is they lie by omission. They just lie by omission all the time. So, it's the same template in every country. Its success is mainly in the most controlled zones, such as the UK, of course, France and the Crown Territories, Australia and New Zealand, So the first 100 days, remember, of the new Starmer regime promises more steering and more subversion of public opinion. As you know, we have been banging on about this for years. Maybe it's time to drop all distractions. You know more than anyone that most won't, of course. But it is up to you, the listener, to act accordingly. And just remember, it is never too late. Hope you enjoyed that. Got it in under an hour, and I hope the information's useful. Remember, stay in touch, info@windowsontheworld.net. Do please support the show. Email me at info@windowsontheworld.net if you would like to join the £5 a month club, which helps out with some of the bills. or you can use our PayPal or Patreon on the homepage at windowsontheworld.net, the most marginalised show on the internet, but in many ways the most important. Thanks a lot, and see you on the next show.